Good morning, witches. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going over how to choose a pagan path, and this was a request by Heather Griffin right here. And I think it is a great question to ask because a lot of people face this question, how do I choose a pagan path when they first get into paganism? And I know it's something that I definitely faced and I had a lot of trouble with. And I think we all know at this point I never did answer my own question of which path I was going to choose, and I just sort of went the way of the eclectic. But I'll get to my personal experience with that in a little bit. But first, I wanted to go over what a pagan path is, because the thing is, I noticed when you type in Google how to choose a pagan path or different pagan paths, you tend to find a lot of, I don't want to call it conflicting information. I guess it is. I just feel like the term pagan path gets used incorrectly pretty often. So before we begin, just to clarify, when I say pagan path, I don't mean solitary versus coven witch. I also don't mean a kitchen witch versus a green witch versus a tech witch versus a chaos witch. Those, personally, I would probably refer to as classifications. Those are more about your particular style of practicing witchcraft. And keep in mind, not all witches are pagans. And to be fair, those types of witches, that deserves its own episode, which I do plan on getting to at some point in the future. But when I say a pagan path, I'm looking at more of the actual spiritual, religious, or faith-based paths that you can choose. Keep in mind that pagan is an umbrella term that covers various different religions, faiths, and systems of belief. If you look in the dictionary, it's just going to tell you that paganism is, pretty much any religion that doesn't fall under one of the major religions being, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, so on and so forth. I have heard paganism be defined in many different ways. My personal views of it is that paganism is usually going to involve the worship of nature in some way. Oftentimes it's a belief in polytheism or animism, but not always. Usually it involves some form of witchcraft, but again, just like not all witches are pagans, not all pagans are witches. And yeah, that's about it. It's a very loose definition, but that's why we call it an umbrella term. Now, what falls under paganism? Those get to be much more specific, and those are what I'm talking about when I discuss pagan paths. And there are a lot of them. And then even some of those have their own little subclasses. Like look at Wicca, for instance. There's Gardnerian, Dianic, Saxon, and those are just naming a few. So yeah, that question, when you're asking yourself, which path do I want to walk? It's a complicated one. So understandably, people tend to have a little bit of trouble with that. But I also want everybody to keep in mind, you do not have to feel like you have to follow any particular path. Now, I call myself an eclectic because I don't follow any one particular path. I'm also not just one of those classifications I mentioned earlier. And then some people don't follow any particular path. They just might do their own thing, but then follow the gods and goddesses and the religion of a particular culture. Like some people might just follow the Greek pantheon or the Egyptian, and then do their own style of witchcraft and pagan practices and call it a day. So don't feel pressured into choosing a path. Don't feel like you're not a real witch if you don't choose one. It's absolutely not the case. There are a lot of benefits to finding a path that works for you, but really only pick one if it really speaks to you, if the belief systems are something you completely agree with. Like I started off with Wicca, but personally, I don't agree with the threefold law and some of the other tenets that go with Wicca, which is, I don't have a problem with it, it's just not for me personally, which is why I am not a Wiccan. So don't try to shoehorn yourself into a faith that doesn't necessarily work for you just because you feel like that's what you have to do. I have found lots of merit in lots of different paths, and you can cherry pick a little bit here. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you do want to possibly try to find a path or just explore your options, I recommend asking yourself some questions first. Do you currently have any beliefs about a higher being? That is a god or a goddess, or many gods or goddesses, or maybe you're more of an animist. So think about that. Are you a pantheist, animist, polytheist, monotheist? Do you have any ideas that you already believe in that kind of already structure your belief set and your faith. And it doesn't have to be specific. You might be like me and you're like, I think there's something, but the details? That's okay. Just, you know, if you already have some sort of preset belief, that might influence what you choose going down the road. Do you have beliefs about the origin of nature and humanity? I don't necessarily mean evolution versus creationism. Personally, I do believe that science and magic can go hand in hand, so I'm totally a believer in evolution. However, aside from the Big Bang Theory, how Earth got to be here, how our universe came into existence. Again, if you already have some sort of belief of your own already set up, that might influence the path that you choose. Do you believe in the soul or something similar? What do you think happens after we die? What do you believe is our purpose, is the purpose of all human life? You might have some more, but just really sit down and think about it. Spend some time maybe writing it out and journaling about what your current beliefs are. Which ones are for you absolutely solid, set in stone? Which ones you have a loose belief about? And which ones that you're just like, I have no clue. And if you're like, I have no clue about every single one, again, it's not a big deal. That's totally fine. But if you're someone who you believe in reincarnation, you have always believed in reincarnation, you may not necessarily choose a path that believes something else happens to people after they die. And if you just don't know, I mean, either just keeping an open mind, you might, pick up a new belief along the way in your research, or you could just enjoy leaving the universe the mystery that it is. Nothing wrong with any of those options. Okay, here comes the tough part. It's going to require a lot of research, but I'm not going to tell you to go out and buy every book on every possible pagan path because that is way too much reading. So a really good introductory book to just give you a general idea of several different paths you can choose from is Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler. And now I've mentioned this book before in previous videos, and that is because it is a wonderful book. Margot Adler herself was a Wiccan, so this does focus a lot on Wicca. However, she does a really good job covering, I first heard about chaos magic through this woman, and chaos magic is not exactly pagan. Also, the book was originally published in, I think, the 70s, but she continued to update it and put out new publishings or whatever it's called. Not necessarily frequently, but every, several years up until when she passed away just a few years ago. So don't look at it and be like, hey, this came out in 1974, that's outdated. No. She was very good about keeping this book very, very relevant. As far as I know, that is the only book out there that kind of gives a little bit of introductory information about so many different paths. Typically, if you want to learn about a path, you have to get a book that's just about that path, and then if you end up not being interested in it, then it was a waste of time and money. But if anybody else knows of any books that are similar to Drawing Down the Moon, please let me know what they are, because I'd love to check them out, and you can put them in the comments below. That might also help out some of my other viewers. I also recommend looking at various mythology and folklore. It's going to give you a great idea of different cultures, particular set of beliefs, and some insight about their pantheons and their archetypes. This is also a really good idea if you're currently looking for deity to work with. There are a ton of places on the internet where you can read folklore and mythology absolutely free, or download a free, PDF or ebook file. I will leave links to those in the description box down below. Okay, so maybe at this point you've whittled down a few different options you find interesting. Okay, I might get a little bit of hate for this, but from there, I'm going to recommend you go to Reddit. Almost every single pagan path you can possibly think of has its own dedicated subreddit, usually more than one. And then from there, on their information tab, they usually have a wiki, not always, but they're usually going to recommend great reading to get you started, and usually a more thorough description of what their beliefs are. And if you have questions, you just ask them there. Most of these groups are really welcoming to newcomers. I have seen complaints in some of the witchcraft subreddits saying like baby witches need to quit, blah, blah, blah. Personally, I don't have an issue with baby witches asking questions there, but some people get annoyed if you're asking something that is a really easy Google question. But please don't let that turn you away. It's a really great source of information. And like I said, for the most part, the communities are really great to work with. Okay, thank you, Heather, for a wonderful video suggestion. If anybody else has anything else that they would like me to cover, please another thing to leave down in the comments below. If this was something that you were really interested in, please thank Heather as well. If you learned something today and this helped you out, hit that little thumbs up for me, and if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell so you get notifications. I almost always forget, here is my email and Instagram. Always gotta get that in at the last second there. That's all for today, witches, but I've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. We're still working through the rune series every Wednesday. Link is up here to the first video in that if you haven't caught it yet. The fall equinox is coming up, so I will be releasing a video soon on celebrating for Mabon. And I've got a whole list of videos that people have suggested or asked for, so those are all going to be coming out bit by bit. So I will see you all on the next one. Today is Sunday, so have a great upcoming week.